and special education teacher. In my free time, which doesn't really exist anymore while all of my kids are out of school and home with us, I like to go on snacky walks, which is basically bribing my children to go outside with me by giving them a snack, or playing tea party, which usually involves my 3-year-old daughter getting all of her stuffed animals and taking a trip to Africa. So those are the things that I like to do. And again, I will be with you during these 4 sessions. Oop, I have someone in the waiting room. Let me let them in. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. So again, Randy, you asked a little bit about this sequence. So I want to tell you how it's connected to your work, both as principals and as teachers. So during some sessions, we will have leaders with us. During some sessions, it'll only be teachers. During some sessions, it'll be a mix of the two. What we're going to talk about over the next 4 sessions is how to really think about systems and structures that support all learners, particularly learners who might be, good morning, who might be a little, good morning, a little behind in terms of their learning. But we know that that takes not only teachers, but also principals and leaders in thinking about systems and structures. So we've invited leaders to particular webinars. I believe the next one, we asked that everyone come to that webinar to really think about assessment's role in all of this. But our goal is to have this be a community practice where we can all come together, ask questions, and thinking about systems and structures that support all learners. And again, if you just popped in, my name is Allie Wilson. I'm just going to go back a slide quickly. I'm coming from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm going to support you with these next 4 webinars, 1 each month, to really think about systems and structures that support all students. All right, so the work that we're doing today and to come really does connect to the Nebraska teacher and principal standards. And in particular, when we think about teachers, teachers are the ones that really do this critical work with students because they're directly connected. They provide that instruction every day. So we are going to focus on planning and preparation to ensure teachers are ready to address those gaps in student learning while focused on grade level content. We're also going to think about instructional strategies that support students while acknowledging their differences in learning. And we'll also think about assessment as a tool to identify critical gaps in any additional needs that they have. And when we think about performance standards for principals, we've got 3 big connections here. First, what is the vision for addressing unfinished learning? What is a model of continuous improvement that we can make to ensure we are starting to get closer to that vision? And finally, thinking through staff development. And let me just say too, I'm using this word unfinished learning a lot. In different places, it means different things. So I just want to norm on a definition as we kick off our sequence today. And that is students who are not yet performing at grade level. They might have a need in decoding or fluency or content or vocabulary, but right now, students with unfinished learning due to either the COVID slide, not being in school in the spring, due to having a particular learning disability, due to being an EL student and having maybe some still learning English as a second language, all of those things might cause a student to have additional needs to access grade level content. So when I say those terms, students with unfinished learning, that's who I'm referring to. Does that make sense? Okay, Nebraska seems to use that term more than others, so it might be more normed there than other places. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and jump into our content today. In order to make this the most engaging in the next 75 minutes we have, I will be asking you to go into breakout groups. So when you see this image, that means a breakout group is coming up. If you see the chat, that means that I'm likely gonna ask you to put your thoughts into the chat. And finally, if you see this image of 2 people talking, I'd love for you to unmute and share. However, we're a small group. If you want to chat or if you want to unmute and share instead, that's totally fine with me. All right. We're going to break all the rules today. Okay. So as we think about this kind of sacred space that we have for a very short time, here are some of the norms that I have. I'd love for you to keep on the camera when you can. I understand that you might be supporting teachers or supporting students or have kids in your background. If you're not able to put your camera on, that's totally fine. You can keep it off. If you can, I'd love to see you. I'd rather make, I'd want to make this as close to in-person as possible. Second, stay on mute just to minimize any background noise. When I bring you back into breakout groups, I might remind you to go on mute just so we can hear each other speaking one at a time. Third, trust the process. As we go through this process together, you might hear things that your school doesn't do or you haven't done before. So stay with me and ask questions if you do have any, or if you're having any doubts. And finally, take a strengths-based approach. One of the things I've learned a lot about when thinking about students with unfinished learning is that when I think about what they can do, it actually really changes my mindset and changes my approach to instruction. And so today we're going to be thinking a lot about what role that assets-based mindset plays in all of this work. All right, so during these 4 sessions, I'm going to ask you to use a virtual note catcher. So in the chat right now, I'm going to put in a link for that note catcher. Please click on that link. And when you do, you will see this window pop up. All right, so again, in the link, in the chat, there's a link for your virtual note catcher. You can click make a copy. And then this is your document to type on. So take a moment, open up your note catcher and either give me a thumbs up, or you can chat done using the chat box. Thanks, Dottie. Dottie's all set. So take a moment. Thanks, Randy. Take a moment to get set up. Thank you. And your name is Rod, is that correct? Rod, can I change your name on the Zoom window?
I'm Rod. Yeah, Rod Gaston.
Thankfully for the whole world, there's only one Joseph Prac.
There were 3, and now there's 1. Triplets, maybe. I have twins, so like, who knows? I get them confused all the time. Okay. And welcome, Kim. My name is Allie. I'll be leading your webinars. It's a small cohort, so feel free to unmute and share if you have any questions at all. All right, friends, does anybody need additional time to get that note catcher? All right. If you do, just privately chat me. I'm happy to help you. And we're going to be using that quite a bit today. So here are our 2 objectives for this session. Could I have a volunteer just unmute and read them for us, please?
Yeah. Examine the research base that informs our approach to equitable unfinished learning, and learn tools to reframe deficit-based thinking.
Thank you, the real Joseph Rex. I appreciate that. All right. And this is the question we are seeking to answer during these 4 sessions. What does equitable instruction for students with unfinished learning both look like and sound like? So we'll be talking about both of those buckets today. And to do this, we're going to go right into the classroom. So every day you have the opportunity to work with teachers, to work with students. So let's go ahead and get some of their perspective on what it might feel like to be a student who struggles or a student with unfinished learning. So in your note catcher, you're going to read about Sarah. And as you read about Sarah, I want you to highlight each teacher action. So let me show you where Sarah lives in your note catcher. She's right here. So you're going to see that her story takes up about 1.5 pages, and it goes down to here. So as you read about Sarah, feel free to use whatever tool you want to annotate. You could either make a comment, you can bold it, you can highlight it, by by using the highlight tool, whatever you want to. However you want to interact with this, but I want you to notice the teacher actions. Okay? All right. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to read this story, highlight each teacher action. Feel free to turn off your camera if you'd like to now as you're working on this, and I'll call you back at about 9:12. If you do end up finishing early, just go ahead and either chat me that you're done, or you can turn your camera back on. Thank you, Dottie. Thank you, Rachel. And if anyone didn't get the note catcher or came in afterwards, let me know so I can make sure to send that your way. All right. So we're going to get the opportunity to talk a little bit about what is happening in Sarah's classroom. So in breakout groups, I want you to consider these two things. First, what actions did the teacher take to support Sarah? So these are the things that you highlighted. And then if you're thinking about either observing someone's classroom or teaching your class, what feels familiar to you about Sarah's story? And when have you seen this play out? So I'm going to put you in two different breakout groups. Let me show you where these questions are in your note catcher, because you won't be able to see that slide when you're in a breakout group. So this is the slide that I just shared with you. That's in the second page of your note catcher. And you can go ahead and discuss these questions. If you'd like to, there's room for you to take notes down here if you want to. Totally up to you. Any questions before I put you in breakout groups for about 4 minutes or so? Okay, has everyone used the breakout group function before? You'll see the little icon pop up and then you'll join. Okay, great. All right, breakout groups are opening up. There you go. And I'm going to bring you back in about 4 minutes around 9:17. Let me try that one more time. Now breakout groups should be popping up on your screen.
Allie.
Yeah, Kim.
Hey, I know during the first meeting in December, School Kid had asked maybe that the NDE folks would do less conversation or maybe not even join breakout rooms. What's the plan for today?
I feel like it's beneficial to have NDE folks in the room for two reasons. One, to guide the conversation and just really be strategic about, I'm just going to close this full, if she received below grade level instruction at her level, or this thing called an instructional level, which for older kids doesn't really exist. All right. And I am all about giving assessments that identify a student's strengths and needs. This is what my dissertation was about. But students, especially older readers, do not have one instructional level. All right. And we'll talk more about the why behind that later. So if you're tensing up when I say that, no, I'm going to come back around to it. But there's a lot of things that go into a student's reading level, and it doesn't equal one letter or one grade level. Okay. So why isn't Sarah ready? She was pulled out of grade level content for intervention, as Laura named. So much computer time, right? And a great teacher usually does a lot better than a great intervention. She also received push-in support instead of core instruction and got everything on her level. Again, students aren't levels, which gave her lack of access to grade level content. All right. So why is this approach problematic? Take a moment and just read this quote to yourself. And give me a thumbs up once you've finished. Thank you, Joseph. All right, I see Rachel nodding. Yeah, all right. And so when we think about supporting students where they are or giving them lower level text and instead of grade level text, it has the best of intentions. We don't ever want students to struggle. We don't want them to have a hard time reading, and we think that is the answer, and often it's not. What happens here, especially in these times when students are not being able to come to school because of COVID or impacted by not having access at home, this challenge is amplified. And therefore we think, oh, we just have to meet them at their level and they'll be able to succeed. But what happens is they miss core instruction. And so that gap widens. And we'll think a little bit about what that looks like later on. So the author goes on to say that meeting students where they are and trying to remediate learning deficits often just results in having them be even more further behind the next year. And it's this cycle of inequity and this cycle of students trying to make up what they missed and then continuing to miss grade level instruction. All right. I see you all nodding. It seems like this is old hat. Is this something your schools have talked about a lot before, or is this kind of new? Go ahead, Dottie.
Allie, I think it's old hat, but I still think schools are doing it.
Yeah.
So I think schools get it, but they don't know what to do instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And it's really helpful too, because all schools do something a little bit different or have a little bit approach. So what we're talking about is theory right now, right? Like in theory, we should ensure that all students have access to grade level content and get these interventions, like, right? We're talking about theory. So in the next couple of webinars, the next 3, we're going to get on the ground work. We're going to think about assessments that work for students and then how to start filling those gaps. So that's where we're going. But a lot of this work really does lie in mindset, which is where we're focusing today. So if this is repeated content, and I do think the next thing we do will be repeated, that's okay, because we're continuing to build the mindset of why do we need to take a new approach? What is problematic about this one to ensure that we are invested in where our work begins. But keep me posted if this is like stuff you've learned before that isn't very helpful too, because I want to be aware of that. Okay, and so here we think about Sarah getting this inequitable instruction. The teachers had the best of intentions and they focused on making sure those learning gaps were filled. But that in turn turns into inequitable instruction, because unlike her peers, Sarah is going to get at-level instruction, and the gap between her peers and herself is just going to grow and grow and grow, and she's not going to be able to make that up. Okay, so our work today and to come is how do we change Sarah's story, and how do we change the story for all of our students who do have this unfinished learning, no matter the reason: disability, status, EL status, students who might not have access at home, students who came in with little gaps that widened. It doesn't matter. How do we approach serving students with unfinished learning? All right, so first let's define this aspect of inequitable instruction. When we're thinking about inequitable instruction, it's that some students get grade level instruction and some students do not. Typically, when we think about inequitable instruction, we can identify that this is happening disproportionately to students of color, students who struggle, students who have IEPs, et cetera. They have less access to grade level content than other students do. So I just want to name that this is disproportionate in subgroups, and we have to be highly aware of that. And that's where some of this mindset work comes in, to ensure that we know that for all of our students, they can achieve, and having those high expectations is a huge piece of this puzzle. The other reason this is really important is because it doesn't affect students just right now. In the short term, today, it affects them in the long term. So when students are not given access to grade level instruction, it also impacts them in college and career, and disproportionately. So 40% of college students will take at least one remedial class, but a disproportionate number of those are students of color. So just take a moment and look at those stats. So when we think about Sarah, Sarah is one of these statistics right now for where she is. She's required to take remedial classes, and she will likely, if she goes on to college, continue taking a remedial class. But this isn't where the problem ends. Students who do take a remedial class are 74% more likely to drop out. All right. So this cycle of how we're supporting students with this unfinished learning or intervention, whatever you want to call it, impacts them not only with their confidence in school, not only in the short term in high school, but across their college and career and life trajectory. Okay. All right. How many of you have read The Opportunity Myth before? No? Some? Okay, I'm seeing some waffling. Okay, great. That's good. So we're going to revisit this report. If you don't know about it, you'll get enough information here to really learn about it. And I can send you the report in the follow-up email if you want. It's a big, thick electronic packet. If you have heard about this, we are going to zoom in on just some snapshots from the report. So hopefully there'll be some new information in there for you. Okay, so a group called TNTP wanted to answer this question: how can so many students be unprepared to meet goals in college and career? What's happening here? So they collected a lot of data. This is in 2018, by the way. They followed 4,000 students across diverse school districts. They looked at K-12 classes, did over 1,000 observations, looked at 20,000 work samples. They analyzed student surveys, they interviewed students. It's a huge, robust data set. Then they went and analyzed all of this to answer this question: why are students graduating unprepared to meet college and career goals? So what they found when they looked at all of this work is that in general, students were doing pretty well. They were succeeding 71% of the time. If you had 71% of your students succeeding on your assignments, like, that's not terrible. But when they looked at the assignments themselves, they noticed that only 17% of them, yeah, I see Rachel nodding, were at grade level. Yeah, this is an illusion of success we're creating. And as a special educator in middle school, I did this. I was like, I'm gonna grade you at your level. All of my students were, well, many of my students were getting A's, and my parents would call and say, my kid is still learning to read. How is this possible? And so I was feeding into this unending cycle of inequitable instruction. All right, so the difference is this is an illusion of success here. Students are doing okay. However, it's not grade level work. And this is the definition here of inequitable instruction. Some students get it. Some students do not get access to core instruction. So when they teased apart all of the data, they noticed that there were 4 different significant things that allowed some students to be prepared for college and career, and some students not to be prepared or not to be successful in college career. So these are the 4 different things. Because I've been talking a lot, I'd love for someone just to unmute and read the 4 recommendations that they had.
I can do that. And consistently provide grade level assignments, provide strong instruction, deeply engage all the students, have high expectations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaston. Yes, so these are their 4 recommendations. And we know these are good things, right? This is all best practice, but this is when they drilled down on the difference between students who succeeded beyond high school and students who did not. These were the 4 factors. And we know, especially when we're thinking about students in 6th through 12th grade, engagement, number 3 there, is huge. We have to motivate them. We have to keep them engaged. So we're going to dig a little bit into this report by looking at snapshots of data. And we only have 7 folks here, so I think we'll each just take one of these snapshots. So ignore the count off by 6 part over here. We'll just get into, we'll choose which snapshot we're going to review in a minute. And so I'm going to give you 3 minutes to review one of your data snapshots. I'll show you where those are momentarily. And then we're going to summarize them to our group here. So let me show you where these snapshots are from the report. I'm back in my note catcher here. All right, so snapshot 1, here's the quotation, and then you're going to write a 1-sentence summary of this snapshot. If instead of writing a summary, you just want to respond like, oh, this is important because, or this made me think, it doesn't matter. Just be ready to share what it was about and what you thought about this snapshot, even if you don't do the 1-sentence summary. So snapshot number 1, here's snapshot number 2. Snapshot number 3 is this graphic plus a little bit of text. Again, same with snapshot number 4. It's a graphic as well as text. Snapshot number 5 is a graph. And snapshot number 6, again, is text. So these 6 snapshots are all in your note catcher, and we're going to divide and conquer here. So I'm going to give you 3 to 4 minutes to read it and think about what do you notice about this, create a 1-sentence summary, and then we're going to share out. So for simplicity, Laura, let's have you do number 1, Rod number 2, Randy number 3, Kim number 4, Rachel number 5, Dottie number 6. Tina, let's also have you do number 5. Okay, so feel free to turn off your camera. I'm going to give you about 4 minutes. We'll come back together at 9:38, and then you're going to share out what your snapshot was about.
Hey, Ali, I'm having trouble getting into my, how do I move the, I can't read my snapshot. I can't, could you just scroll down to number 5 for me? I can't.
Oh, I did. Yeah, it's on your note catcher, but I can, are you on number, which number did I give you, Randy? 5?
3,
Okay.
but I lost my
will
note catcher. I'm not sure where that's.
Sure, I will resend you the note
I've
catcher.
zoomed a ton, but I've never used note catcher. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's so complicated to do. Let me see if I can just put it all on. Oh, you have a big one. Let me see if I can put it all on one screen for you here, and then we'll see if we
Okay.
can find your note catcher as well.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. I will leave this on here for you, and I'm also going to just go ahead and make you a copy and send it to you in the chat, so that it should be
Okay.
a copy that you can
Oh,
write
okay.
right into. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so come on back when you're ready. And so what we'll do is we'll just go through each of these snapshots, and I'm going to ask us either to share a 1-sentence summary, if that's easy for you, or just something that came to you or that you noticed as you were reading this. So let me scroll back up to snapshot 1. All right, Laura, when you were reading snapshot 1, what stood out to you? Or what was your summary?
Hold on, delayed unmuting there. So I kind of tried to summarize it. So teachers that hold high academic expectations and demonstrate to their students that they believe they can achieve, these students had better academic outcomes and positive self-perception of their academic ability.
So what does that mean to you? Why is that important?
I think, when teachers say, you're able to do grade level work, I'm going to provide the supports and the scaffolding that you need to get there, that in turn makes the kid feel, hey, my teacher thinks I can do this. And so therefore they internalize that and then feel that they also, they just have a better self-perception of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So high expectations matter. There was a study done like 30 years ago, and they showed, I don't remember the nuances of it. I should go back and read it. But essentially, someone once told me, hey, we studied high expectations. It doesn't make a difference. This was based on one study decades ago. And so for a while, I believed that. The community, the academic community I was a part of, we believed that. And so we kept thinking, we have to meet students where they are. We have to meet students where we are. That's going to support them. And then we realized we were completely wrong. That study was completely wrong. High expectations matter. They impact the way we think as teachers, as leaders. They impact the way that students think about themselves and the confidence they have. So that's a really, really important thing to highlight. Thank you, Laura, for doing so. All right, snapshot number 2. Can you summarize or share what stood out to you?
To summarize that, it was when students were given more opportunities to do grade level work, more often than not, they met those expectations. And so, and that was just what I guess what I was thinking on that is your students are going to live up to whatever expectations you provide for them. So, if you going to lower them, they're going to work down to that. If you're going to higher their expectations, they're going to work up to it.
Yeah, thank you, Rod. So again, that mindset of high expectations and also access to grade level instruction, right? And so if we set the bar here and we scaffold to get students here, they will perform them. We have to believe it and we have to give them access and not pull that access before they get a chance to succeed. Absolutely. Thank you, Rod. Snapshot number 3. I don't remember who I gave this to. I apologize.
That was mine. And basically with number 3, low expectations from teachers will set students up for failure. And, I guess mainly good grades do not always mean the student is learning at the proper grade level or the proper standards that they need to, master at that grade level in that particular class.
Yeah, thank you. And looking at this graphic here, identifying when students are supporting when teachers are supporting their students with that grade level content, they will meet that bar. So again, the importance of access to grade level content and that mindset of high expectations. All right, snapshot number 4. Kim, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. That was mine. And basically, many students who have the ability to do grade appropriate work aren't being given the opportunity to do that. And it seems to be that low income students are the ones that are coming to the top as they're having fewer higher quality academic experiences. So it makes me think about what what Laura said, just making sure that we're having the scaffolding in place for all students, regardless of what they're experiencing, having the scaffolding in place to make sure that they can be successful.
Yep, absolutely. And again, there is a disproportionate, there's something that's really inequitable happening here, which is white students get offered access to core instruction more often than our students of color. Absolutely. All right, snapshot number 5. That was this kind of complicated line graph here. I think I gave that to you, Tina, and Rachel. Did I give it to both of you?
Yep.
Yeah, I had to kind of dive into that. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I had to really look at the graph because it is a little challenging, but yeah, thank you. Thank you. That line, it shows students who received work that was 25% at grade level. And then that kind of darker blue line below that shows that these were assignments that were given to students that were not at grade level. So you got to look at that first. And then each report shows the students of color, students from low income families, students beginning substantially behind grade level. So it shows that if teachers really are strategic and really make effort to, have high expectations in the classroom, teachers who give assignments that are 25% or more, that are more on grade level, you see growth in each one of these categories.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Rachel? Tina, thank you for that beautiful summary.
Yes,
That was
it took me
much better than I could have summarized it.
No, to build off of that is that when we think about saying that students need to receive grade level assignments, like this points out that only 1 in 4 can be, if it's grade level, you're still going to see gains, especially for populations we say are underserved or at risk, like students of color, low income, and behind grade level. So it doesn't have to be every assignment. It actually only has to be a minority of the assignments, and that still we see gains in our in these populations. I would venture to say all students. So
yeah, and you're right, it is all students. So one thing too that we are seeing is that students who start the year behind, like we're talking about our students with unfinished learning, no matter disability status, no matter EL status, all of these other things, no matter SES status, they make an average of 8 months more growth when they are given access to grade level content than those same groups of students that are not given access. All right, that are only taught at their level. So 8 months more growth. And when we're thinking about our students with unfinished learning, we might be thinking about our students who can't read or still learning to read fluently, who might have some gaps with phonemic awareness because maybe they're EL students, or maybe they never got strong phonemic awareness instruction, or maybe they moved in first grade. Could be a host of different reasons. But even those students, when they're given access to this content that feels hard, maybe feels hard for us to give because it feels challenging, they're making so much more growth than when they're just taught on their level. So this is significant. And I think Tina and Rachel, you did such a nice job in articulating this tiny little, what this green line means. It's just 25% of assignments are on grade level. It's not 100%.
It's not a whole lot.
It's not a whole lot. And what's interesting too is that means there's a lot of kids who aren't getting any access to grade level instruction, right? So we do see too, the more they're given access to grade level instruction, when that 25% becomes 30, becomes 35, students make even more growth. But I think, who said this earlier? Maybe Laura, you may have said it. We have to scaffold our support, right? It's not just read this grade level text at 8th grade. You'll be fine. It's what supports can I do as a teacher? All right. So this is really important. When you think about both access to grade level instruction and high expectations, you're seeing that same amount of growth for students beginning behind grade level. When teachers believe that students can do it, their ability to perform is much higher than students who don't believe that they can do it. All right, so with the best of intentions, often teachers are creating systems of inequitable instruction instead of ensuring that their students will be ready to leave high school, college, and career ready. All right. So again, this is called the opportunity myth. I will send you the report in the follow-up email, but it has lots of these really interesting gems in it to think through and to talk about. I do realize I forgot snapshot number 6. So let me go down there. And who did snapshot number 6? Maybe someone who is not with us. You know what, I'm going to summarize this in a minute, but just take a moment to read snapshot number 6 to yourself, and then we can summarize it together. It's on my screen if you need it. I see Kim and Rachel nodding. Yeah, essentially, this is kind of repeating what we just thought about. That 25% of the time as students are given access, there is growth, but when you're getting more and more opportunities to give students access to grade level content, you're going to see a massive amount of growth. And I do want to highlight a quotation from this in just a moment in our PowerPoint. So I'm going to switch over to our PowerPoint here. And I will come back a slide in a moment. But here's what I want to really underscore. This achievement gap we think about is not inevitable. It's baked into the system. We are doing this because it's built into the systems we currently have to support our students. And we do it both consciously and unconsciously. We're going to talk about both sides of that equation in a minute. In order to say which students get resources and which students don't. So this is a gap of our own design. So we're going to think about this and the importance of really unraveling the systems that we currently have to support our older readers and why that's so important. Okay, so we're going to first think about this conscious in the next 20 minutes. We're going to think about what we're doing consciously. What are we doing with thought that is disserving students? And then we're going to move and think about, okay, well, when we're talking about students, what is the unconscious? What is the implicit bias we're bringing to these conversations that we can start to unpack as well? So again, two sides of the equation. In the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to think about both of these. And then when we come back together, we're really going to think about on the ground work. What can we do to really start moving towards a system of equity? All right. To think about one of the conscious things that we are doing to support older readers, we might think about intervention, right? This is one of the things we're trying to do really strategically, systematically. So I want to know, when you hear this word intervention, what do you think of? Feel free to either put it in the chat or unmute and share. You can just send it to everyone if you put it in the chat. When you think of this word intervention, what comes to mind? Thanks, Laura, for kicking us off. All right, once you put your response in there, go ahead and read what your colleagues have written. All right, so some of us think about all the intentional data that goes into this, giving more instruction, more time with students on specific work. Yeah. One of the ways that I've thought about intervention in the past is like this key to unfinished learning. If I plug students into this program or into this time or into this practice, it will be able to support them, right? That's one way we think about intervention a lot, all right? But when we think back to the opportunity myth, we know that actually access to grade level instruction is one key to ensure students are starting to close that gap. And so where does that fit in this world of intervention? So I think we're going to look at this, the root word intervention, to give us a better understanding of how we might define it currently might fall short to support our students. Take a look at the definition of this word intervention. Just read it for yourself. Now I would love to hear from you in response to this question. If we're thinking about intervention as the way it's defined here, is this the approach that we want to take for students who have unfinished learning? Why or why not? This is kind of rhetorical, but I'd love to hear your response as well. Feel free to unmute and share or share in the chat. What do we think about this term and this approach to supporting students with unfinished learning?
Well, if we go back to Sarah, that kindergarten teacher, she had concerns. And so when she decided to talk to the reading specialist and her colleagues, you know, she was trying to do a little bit of intervention or to get some recommendations of where to go. And then that's where the intervention of taking it to the next step ended. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that kindergarten teacher tried to make an intervention move, but it did not transpire.
And why not, Tina? Why didn't it serve her?
Well, I think she tried, but when she's met with the reading specialist and her colleagues, they just all placed the concern under an umbrella to say, hey, this kid will catch on. It's because they moved from a different school. And, you know, we hear this. And over time, you know, she's a kindergartner. She'll catch on. Mm-hmm. She enjoys reading. She enjoys listening to you reading. She'll catch on. But that kindergartner teacher had the teacher sixth sense, if you will, to know something's not right. And we do have that in all of us. We know when something's not right. That's the first thing of intervention.
Yeah, right. And so here we're thinking about that, like there was this thing that was happening with Sarah when she was younger, her ability to really hear the sounds and the words and start decoding and putting them together, that was kind of ignored. So no intervention happened, no support happened there. And then later on, she was kind of stuck in programs, pulled out of the core. And so as we're thinking about Sarah, and I love, Tina, that you used her as an example to kind of ground our instruction, because we're going to revisit her in a minute here. Intervention often interrupts a student's flow of core instruction. We jump in the middle, we take them out, we add an intervention class that's really disconnected to core content, right? And we think that by plugging a student into a program that is going to somehow magically be the bullet that like dissolves their need. Now they can read and they can go back into class and they can think about all these complex topics. And that's not actually how it works. When we provide intervention by plugging students into a program, it often fails because we are interrupting their ability to access core instruction. So let's think about older adolescent readers. When we look at intervention in middle school and high school, there's limited data that we use to identify students who need it. In fact, when I reviewed the literature, which there's not very much about supporting middle and high school students, typically we use categorical data. We might use end of grade assessment scores, MAP scores, some like level score to determine placement into intervention. That's typically what we do because we don't have a lot of diagnostic data for older kids. It's hard because their reading profiles are complex and varied. It's not as simple as when you look at a kindergarten and they have a gap with the letters L and S and they're still working on the digraph TH. That's not how it looks for older readers. There's motivation, there's engagement, there's this fluency component, there's comprehension. We can't just plug them into a one-fits-all intervention, which is typically what middle schools and high schools offer. Does this sound similar to what's happening at your schools? Do you have an intervention program? Yeah, and how are students placed in it? Disability status, level? Rachel, go
Yep.
ahead.
Yep, we try to triangulate. We try not to use just one data point because that's not, we know that's not the picture of the reader. And so we use teacher input, we use map data, and NSCAS, our summative data. And then we also take a look at their, the picture over time. We have a reading interventionist that spends a lot of time making sure that students who are in our reading intervention class really belong there, and it's not a will thing. For many of our students, it's a will thing about why their test scores are in the dumps, but they have all the skills. So yeah, that's what we do. It's not perfect at all, but we try.
And you have a reading interventionist and specialist. That's big.
You're so
Sometimes
lucky.
you don't
Yep,
know.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and teasing apart will and engagement for older kids in itself is really, really hard, right? Yeah, okay. So we know that if we continue these kind of practices too, it's just going to exacerbate this Matthew effect, where the richer get richer in access to core instruction, and those who get intervention get more intervention, get more intervention, get more intervention, and it's a long-term impact. All right, so that's why thinking about this is so important in understanding the nuance that's involved in supporting older students. And this will help us move from Johnny can't read multisyllabic words. So we're going to pull him from 7th grade ELA so that he can work on reading multisyllabic words, to Johnny's still learning to read and put multisyllabic words together. So we're going to build in supports. I'm going to pull out the words from that poem, and I'm going to segment them and read them with him before he reads that poem on his own. What's the shift here in thinking? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute and share. What differences do you see in the from and the to?
In the to, the teacher is saying he's going to get there, and I'm going to support him and take his needs into account. And what supports does he need in order to get there? Where the from is just saying, he can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're thinking about intervention here as a silver bullet in the front, like put him in that, he'll learn it, and then he'll come back to me ready to go. I don't think teachers actually think that, but when we think about supports for students, sometimes we do think of intervention as kind of this thing that someone else will provide, and then bring your student back kind of ready to go with your instruction. And then we're moving from that ongoing approach that Laura named, something that all teachers are responsible for all our students, not their students. And just going to highlight some of these key words here. Can't, pull him, still learning, build in. And again, this is a shift. It's really hard work to do, but that's why it takes so much thinking about before we think about what needs to be in place. Okay, so if we're thinking about intervention as a way to ensure all students can access grade level content and are working towards mastery of grade level standards, it's important to redefine this term as a continuum of supports that exists throughout the school within a classroom, otherwise known as differentiation, but really aligned differentiation. And then sometimes for students who need more, they have intensive intervention in addition to their core instruction. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to visit Sarah one more time here, and we're going to think about what could this look like within the classroom. Knowing that sometimes a student might need a lot of support, sometimes they might need a little, and sometimes they might not need any, but that's not stagnant, right? So maybe they're engaging in a topic they've read about before, they know a lot about, they don't need any support, they got it. Or maybe they're learning about a topic they don't know a lot about, and they need multiple reads, or they need some pre-taught vocabulary. So students are so dynamic and so different that sometimes that we have to be really strategic about how supports are provided into their classroom. And as teachers and as leaders, we need to figure out the right amount of support and when, and use diagnostic data to do that. So what I'm going to ask us to do is revisit Sarah. She's now in 8th grade. And I think I'll put you in groups of 3 for this, just so you don't have to hear me continue to drone on here. And you can think about Sarah's experience in the classroom and highlight, what is the teacher doing to support all students? What is she doing to support Sarah? And when we're thinking about this continuum of intervention, what might it mean? So I'll show you where you can find this in your note catcher. under the snapshots is around page 10 here. So as you read about Sarah, you're going to read about her 8th grade year, and it's about 1.5 pages of text. And then you're going to think about these questions. What scaffolds does she provide for all students for Sarah? And then what does it mean to provide a continuum of supports? So take about 4 minutes of read time. Feel free to turn off your camera, and then we'll get into groups to discuss. Any questions about what you're about to do? All right, I'll bring us back together at 10:07. All right, welcome back. I'm sorry that the time was so short there. One of the things I heard in your groups was how in the classroom, the teacher was doing a lot of differentiation, but really strategic aligned intervention, thinking about what all of her students might need to access this text, because it's not like students who are 8th graders can always read 8th grade text, right? And then what Sarah specifically with her needs and fluency and comprehension might need. And so as we wrap up today, I just want to provide you with a couple of other tools to either share with your colleagues and teachers, or just to think about if these would be tools that will further support your understanding of how we're redefining intervention. And that is this idea of tapping into the unconscious and reframing deficit language. So in your note catcher on your own time, there's this reframing deficit language tool, which helps teachers and schools kind of build this understanding of the unconscious, the words that we're saying, the language we're using to describe students who have unfinished learning, moving from my students can't to my students are learning too. And because as we change our language, it is going to influence our actions and the way we are supporting students with unfinished learning. So I just wanted to name that there's some things in there. There's also an example conversation. When you hear folks using deficit language, how do you address this deficit language? So there's some 4 key steps that are based in research to support the conversation. And there's also an example conversation in there for you. All right. Because of time, we didn't get to unpack this together, but I think that it will work to kind of examine it on your own time. And let me just tell you kind of where we're going, our next steps. So in session 2, in a month from now, we'll think about data. What data do we use in middle and high school to think about the support students need? We'll focus on comprehension first, and then we'll think about how to support fluency. Then in session 3, we'll look at vocabulary and knowledge, how to support those aspects. And then how do we really think about students who are having trouble reading the words on the page and thinking about foundational skills. I'm going to send a follow-up email to you because we are at time. And in this follow-up email is going to be a self-assessment. So you can bring this to your teachers, to your leaders, and kind of take this as a school system to think, how far are you along this trajectory in supporting students with unfinished learning, as far as mindset, as far as the systems in place, and as far as teaching. There's those kind of 3 buckets. So stay tuned for this. I will send it to you in an email. No need to do it now. And finally, I just want to thank you for your time. It is challenging, I know, to be everywhere at once, which I think probably all of you are every day. I'd love to hear your feedback. I put a link in the chat there for you. Feel free to open this up, make sure it works, and then hop offline and continue with your day. And I look forward to seeing all of you in a month.